This is the story of a community coming together as proud custodians of a piece of history, ensuring it's maintained, safeguarded, and shared for generations to come. This isn't just the story about the resilience and rebirth of a tired and worn locomotive. It's about passion and commitment, camaraderie, bravery, and trust. It's a tale of reigniting a rural region by bringing steam back to a heritage rail line. Thanks to Gympie Regional Council for their foresight to return the Rattler to the region and to the community, and for funding the project in partnership with the Queensland State Government. Their contributions and the efforts of many brought this project to fruition, ensuring the romance of rail will live on forever. This is the story of the spirit of the Mary Valley.
Structured of machine, a crippled beast in pain, sitting with no will to live, not even to complain. Rusted chassis, boiler failed, pitted to the max. Bushes worn, seals all gone, and many, many cracks. Pistons worn and valves as well, that all did need replace. Most to new from old was built, almost in every case.
I've been involved with preserved railways for 35 plus years, and so I suppose once you get the bug, it's very hard to get rid of. My involvement with rail preservation goes back to the Zigzag Railway in New South Wales, when as a young and enthusiastic 21-year-old I went up there with a friend and was hooked basically on steam locomotives and railways in general. That really began a second apprenticeship for me, working under people that were the last of the real steam people. So I was fortunate to learn how to maintain a locomotive and also how to operate one from probably the best people that you could have had. When this railway sort of was operating before, I was a driver here. And it went into its hibernation for a few years, and then always sort of kept my finger on the pulse with progress on a restart. And when it sort of looked like it was going to happen, I was sort of peripherally involved with some of the earlier planning. And when the locomotive was sort of decided upon for refurbishment, they started on it and then got to a point, I think, where they reached a crossroads and sort of didn't really know where to go with it. So they approached me to see whether I could come along and get on board and help. So I basically left a job that I'd done for 17 years to step back into the spotlight of rail preservation for a while, which has been good because it's taken me back and rekindled a lot of memories of those earlier years working alongside the people that sort of taught me what I know today.
It's been it's probably mixed emotions as we've come along the road. It started off as just a rebuild of a piece of machinery, but in the time that we got involved with it, you see it becomes a bit infectious. I've seen the passion of my staff grow to a level that I'd never seen before, which was really rewarding for us as a business to see that these guys, when they come to work, they were genuinely excited about working on this project. And right to the end now, seeing it actually be on the track, it's lit a few fires in our crew, and it's probably turned a few of us into steam enthusiasts that we didn't know we were.
Essentially, it was a total rebuild from stripped down to chassis and all the way back up. Now, heritage groups obviously aren't that, haven't got that much money. And normally, you'll cut corners where you can and restore a locomotive to a condition that suits the track. I would be very comfortable in saying this locomotive is in A1 condition. It's mainline condition, we call it, and certainly it's as good as the day it was built.
Well, what we found in the project was there was very few items that were identical to each other. So it wasn't the opportunity of being able to send it out or sublet it out and get it built on a CNC lathe that it'll automatically repeat 100 of one item. You know, every side or every individual plate had to be measured individually, machined individually. So the skill set these guys got wasn't walking up to a computer and punching in some measurements. They had to old school it. And I think, that will be a massive benefit to the tradesmen and the apprentices that worked on the project in the future. For my staff to be part of actually putting in flogged rivets, prior to this, a lot of huck bolts and that we used to use in other industries we'd had experience with, but actually forging and heating bolts and then having to flare them was an experience. The day when we got involved with actually reboring the cylinders was fairly critical. We got involved with that. Q Rail actually supplied us the boring machine. It was the original boring machine that they used to use for rebuilding years ago. So that was a challenge for us, because when it came to us back in that era, they had no clutches, they had no e-stops. It was plug in and hang on, and we had to find a way to make that fit into this day and age with workplace health and safety. So we had to do a few guidelines like that. Some of the other challenges that we probably had was that getting involved with understanding when a part was going to turn up for install. But because it was new to everyone that was also building the parts, some of those lead times could change in a heartbeat, and just the trickle-on effect where you had to kind of reinvent what your next process was.
Sneak him up a little bit. Whoop. Gympie is very lucky to have the businesses they do in town, and we were lucky to find an engineering company in town that was willing to take the job on and were 110% behind the project from the start. They have some very, very skilled people in their ranks. Olds Engineering at Maryborough have been really fantastic. They're a pretty unique little business in so much as they really cater for bespoke parts. And there's a lot of bespoke parts on a locomotive. They have the ability to sort of take something, they understand what it's got to do when it's finished, and can give you the finished product, both metallurgically, material-wise, and machining-wise, to a very high standard.
It's all got to be right, and it's been just like second nature, I suppose, for me to work on those, because I understood when we were doing it, and I still understand what's required and what's important.
I can get a bit emotional because you stop and reflect on what it's taken to get it to this, and people will never ever appreciate what's gone into it, because it's just been a huge job. Every last nut and bolt.
.967's got a checkered history. It was built in 1950 at Walker's, Maryborough, just up the road from Gympie. It was one of the final batch, and it was pretty much relegated to North Queensland most of its life. Worked around Townsville and the likes, but when it was retired in the late 60s, unlike most of them, it wasn't cut up. It was actually put on Bullcock Beach in Caloundra. It was stripped of all its pieces and put in the park. And I remember when I was a kid playing on that locomotive. It's had a checkered history in retirement. It actually went to Alice Springs for a period as a static display, then came back as part of Bow Desert Rail and was rebuilt by them locally. We acquired the locomotive after Bow Desert shut down. Did a bit of work on it, but since that time, it's been a total strip down and rebuild to a as new locomotive, new boiler, new components. So she's got a long and checkered history. Some might say it's like a cat with 9 lives, really.
It's a good point to make in terms of the current day and age and technology, and yet how people are enthralled and how they're captivated by the Rattler. And I think it goes back to that sense of satisfaction of being involved in the project, of sort of nurturing the project over the various hurdles and around the various bends and twists and turns, and standing back and seeing the satisfaction, seeing the joy which people get, seeing the people recount the stories of when I used to go to school on the train. So, but it's a very pertinent point to make in terms of what is it about steam and about the Rattler which attracts young and old alike, notwithstanding this day and age of technology, and which augurs well for the future of the Rattler.
I think it is the history and the sound and the smell, and as you drive past, you see the people looking at the moving parts, at the motion up the front near the cylinders, and they're watching them all move and trying to work out how it all works.
The noise, the sound, the interface and intricacy of all the pieces that make the locomotive. It's fantastic. It's something, like I said, we have lost 2 generations ago. Seeing 967 come back into the fleet of the Rattler Railway Company, or Mary Valley Rattler, is something that really has generated excitement within the volunteers that we have.
Just hearing it sitting there purr, it's got a heartbeat like you can't explain. And when you see a driver that's there as a volunteer with so much passion for steam, opening that thing up and just letting it roar, oh mate, it is special. It is. You can't explain it until you've been part of it. But it's lighting a fire, all right.
Oh yes, you just have to look around the station. Of course, the Rattler is underpinned by its volunteers, and that's the most important point to make.
Our volunteers are really passionate. They're passionate about rail, they're passionate about the history that goes with the Mary Valley, the social aspects to volunteering. They've made good friends, and I class the Rattler as a family. We're a real family.
Every time I see people here and talk to them, it's their first time here, they're blown away by the venue, the experience, but more importantly, the service they're getting from our volunteers.
Well, I can remember as a schoolboy riding past here to get to school. At that point, the Gympie station really was the centre of the universe for most Gympie residents. We had stock coming in here from our western areas. We had fruit and veggies coming from the Mary Valley into here before those trains were made and sent either north or south. Obviously progress happens, and the main rail line subsequently bypassed Gympie. So, really this precinct here didn't have that activity that I can remember as a young child, and certainly in my school days.
I mentioned before about great projects are never easy. Well, the return of the 967 was never easy either. But that's incredibly significant in terms of Australia. And when was the last time a steam locomotive was rebuilt to the extent that was? And it's decades and decades and decades. So in terms of the standard to which it's been refurbished. So what it goes to is the point I just made about there is effectively a brand new locomotive there for the Rattler to use for decades to come, and it will run for decades. So it's been done very well, it's been done to a very high standard. It anchors the operation, and it's just a really good base for the Rattler Railway Company to work off. And of course, again, there is that affection within the community as well. And we want the community to be proud of the Rattler, and they can really point to that locomotive and be very proud.
As far as Australia is concerned, this whole railway project is very unique. The restoration of the locomotive is probably the most unique to have happened in this country for many years. And the time that we've delivered it in, which is just a little over 2 years, would be a bit of a record considering how extensive the rebuild's been. So yeah, I'm quite proud to have sort of been associated with that, and really it's a team effort. I'm just one spoke in the wheel. You know, there's been so many people that have done the hard yards to actually make it happen that, you know, it's been truly a collaborative effort.
I think it's incredible. These things don't happen too often. A locomotive, a steam locomotive is restored. It's expensive. It takes a lot of specialist work, skills that are slowly disappearing, I guess. And yeah, no, it's an incredible job. And when you see the locomotive, you can see the quality of the restoration work. It's fantastic. It really is.
I think it'll be a real point of difference for Gympie and the region and the Mary Valley. You know, it is so unique as an attraction. It'll be that real identifier.
What I'm very proud to see is coming past the station now and seeing so many visitors and people wanting to experience the Mary Valley Rattler here, and you know, fulfilling one of those bucket list items, I suppose, by having the opportunity to ride on a genuine, authentic steam train. I think it's a great thing, and it's something that not only the residents of the Gympie community should be proud of, but really the whole region.
Everyone that's seen 967 turn up is in awe of the work that John, Flynn and the team have done to rebuild this locomotive. It's not only just something fantastic for the Mary Valley Rattler, but it's something that will be the pride of Gympie for generations to come.
And I think that, you know, the town needs to be commended for actually doing what they've done and trying to preserve this little piece of Queensland rail history.
But this piece was different. The pulse it held within, it seems to spark a fire, and it seems to draw a grin. In finer details shining as it rose up from a dream, and showed us the grunt it's got when water turns to steam. Cranes and trucks to get her home, and get her on the track. Emotions drawing grown men to tear and almost crack. Handshakes and photos, and many, many thanks. And John Flynn forever, you're in our memory banks.